Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Bourne. Hey, did you know it's been 1 year since my book came out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation? Head over to setitonfire.co to learn more. Well, my guest today is Katrin Zimmerman, and she serves as a mentor to clients on business strategy, digital transformation, marketing transformation, innovation, and she serves everyone up to the C-suite. So excited to talk to her today. She has a really cool background, and of course, she's in our innovation space. Katrin, welcome to the podcast. Excited for you to jump in and tell us a little bit about you.
So excited to be here, Natalie. Thanks for having me. It's been a minute until we were able to make this happen, but the more excited I am to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. It has. I told her it's going to be a great podcast because it's taken us so long to get together. But I didn't spend a ton of time in your intro and your background because I was hoping you would do that. I would love for you to just explain kind of some of your experience and career milestones. And then really cool, we'll spend a little bit of time talking on a big project you worked on called the Innovation Hub. But if you'll just jump in and kind of give us a little bit of your background, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, happy to. I have a bit of an unusual, I would say, career trajectory. So people are always like, okay, how did this come to life? But I always say that in the end, the red thread of my career is innovation in the end, because I've always been looking for, okay, what's the next frontier and where are things going? And despite the fact of having worked in various industry, that's the common denominator. So I have a bit of, let me start linear because that always helps for orientation. So I've done my first years of my career within the Lufthansa group in various roles. And I kind of started off after my degree as a flight attendant because I figured it's always lovely to understand the world better. And did a master of innovative hospitality management. And that kind of laid the ground for all jobs coming after. So I've had various positions in strategy fields, from smaller entities to help to restructure them to bigger infrastructure solutions that I was able to help develop in my past within the Lufthansa group, and do that ultimately also for the C-suite as the executive assistant and later chief of staff to one of the C-suite members of the group. And at that time, the subject of digital transformation became heavily relevant in the German market in particular. Consultancies were hitting us up, but it wasn't really a subject to be discussed on the internal communication side. And so we picked it up and proposed eventually a digital unit to the C-suite as a group of executive assistants. And they picked up on it and let us build the Lufthansa Innovation Hub back in the day. So that was quite an exciting time. And then from there, I met the company that I'm now employed with, TLGG, as part of the Omnicom group. And when TLGG was bought by Omnicom back in 2015, the CEO asked me whether I was interested to actually launch its first office in the then headquarter of the company being New York City. And so I moved from Berlin to New York to do that. And that's what I've been doing the last couple of years, helping at the intersection of innovation strategy, business model transformation, and various companies from the automotive to the healthcare to the CPG sector to look into what does that mean for them and how can they make the best out of the opportunity and minimize the risk that might bring.
So let's talk about Innovation Hub a little bit. This was something that you said that you helped to launch. It's really interesting. Before the podcast started, we were talking a little bit about the fact that this phenomenon is actually evolving right now. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing out there in the industry, what you're seeing going on as far as, to your point, we used to hear about innovation hubs all the time. What's going on right now in the world with that?
I think it's an interesting time for innovation in general, because what is happening is that on the one hand side, I think the speed of innovation and the rapidness of it coming to market and being user available in the day-to-day is seeing new heights, particularly when we look at all of the AI chat solutions, for example, that people now have in their hands to create something with. We yet, I think, have to define or find the right use cases that will actually be able to pay for all of the costs that currently incurs. But it's an interesting way of how innovation has become almost like a democratized tool for people to use in the day-to-day and build their own innovations with, that being particularly the technology of AI. That on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, we're seeing a little bit of a drawback of big corporations, whether that's in the US, whether that's in Europe, of pulling back of their innovation efforts or kind of redistributing. And I think that is to some degree a natural logic of whenever something new happens, when a new technology comes about, you need an organization that helps to deploy it, because the expectation of people to do all of the things at the same time, meaning the day-to-day business and evolve the next iteration, is quite a backpack to carry. So depending on the innovation and the impact that it will have on the business model, oftentimes organizations do well in separating that out into a unit and then infusing that into the organization over time. I think where we are now in this next iteration is where some organizations are saying we are well ahead on the train of, or on the deployment of, digital transformation. And that is something that we can now infuse or develop out of the existing organizational infrastructures that we have. And so some of the innovation units that previously held that role to kind of be the beacon of innovation in the context of digital transformation are no longer needed in the way that they were needed previously. And some of the great output that they've been bringing to life is being put in the line organization, and maybe some that isn't showing the ROI is either sold off or divested from. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing kind of like this trend a little bit in the context of what I would say is digital transformation. And then on the other hand side, just sorry to...
Yeah, no, this is great.
to kind of move a little bit further, even when you look at just the consulting revenue on how to deploy AI, just with an Accenture, for example, you see that that might be the next wave of innovation, and that everyone right now is even trying to understand what it will do and how it will impact, because it came so quickly that no one had this enablement of building some of their own infrastructure for it. So right now it is more in the consulting bucket, and prospectively consultancies might find organizational structures to help deploy that next iteration level from a technology side within their organizations.
This is really good. And I want to put a pin in AI for just a moment, because we're going to come back to that and spend a ton of time on it. But specifically to some of the things you were speaking to around the Innovation Hub, I think that what you're leaning into is very astute, in the sense that there is a evolution and a revolution going on within innovation. And again, it does have some tentacles into AI, but some of these motions and movements were happening long before. And you do see this kind of back and forth around, does innovation belong out on its own island, or should we figure out a way to infuse it within the organization? My follow-up question on that is, what are you seeing? I mean, do you feel like a lot of organizations are doing a good job infusing organization throughout, or are you still finding that people need this kind of niche area so that innovation is not suppressed within organizations?
The answer is it depends, Natalie, right? It's unfortunately a little bit more complex than that. And I've always been a big proponent of saying we need to look at the context of the organization and the speed of innovation that that organization is in from an industry and market perspective. So I would say for some organizations, because their cultural context is already very much infused with an innovative DNA, and the industry might not be moving at a super heavy speed into the next iteration of, for example, an S-curve, then I would say, yeah, we can sometimes find organizations that are really, really good in embedding the power of innovation within their day-to-day infrastructures. They have frameworks and tools that allow the wider organization to do, and hence it doesn't necessarily need its own function. For other organizations that see the need, for example, for leapfrogging or others, I would always argue that a dedicated unit brings more emphasis and power simply to that particular subject, and hence I would suggest to do. I think we've seen multitude of studies to kind of say whether an innovation within an organization will be successful, and one of the key drivers is always, how high is it up on the CEO's agenda, and I think that remains to be true. And sometimes the signaling to an organization, I'm establishing a separate unit that is responsible for this, it's just a key aspect of saying, hey, I'm putting my name on it, I'm putting money down for it. It goes beyond the day-to-day work of what we do. it's just a great sign for an organization to say, okay, we are changing. And then
Yeah.
there are change and innovation initiatives that kind of, work without that.
Well, as you're talking about this, I think that's very helpful, and thank you for kind of teasing that out. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about AI, and just again, you said something that I think is very important earlier. You said that people weren't really ready for AI when it came on the scene, and I think that's very true. I think right now we're seeing a lot of people trying to play catch up to really understand it, understand how to leverage it, how to measure the ROI around it, even what pieces and parts to leverage given what could potentially be regulated later, although the government is very slow to kind of answer and add regulation to things.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this space and just some of what you're seeing in the space, again, around maybe readiness, around ROI.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's quite an interesting time to look at the evolution and the speed of evolution that we're seeing. And just last week, I listened to a conversation with Mira Murati from OpenAI. And what is interesting for me to see from an evolutionary standpoint and also generally from a positioning is I think we walked into this and realized, okay, let's democratize this experiment of AI that has lived in the back doors and in the research labs for a very, very long time, and was then kind of pulled out of the box and has since then gained like a lot of, obviously, attraction, investment, but also a lot of scare in society. While I'm a heavy proponent of technology, I'm also looking at this technology with a very cautious eye, because I think it has a component that we are somewhat underestimating, because it's for the first time a technology that is trying to emulate something that so far only humans can do.
Yeah.
But with the caveat that humans have the biological limitation of thinking linear, but a technology of AI analogy is something that can, exponentially develop and amend itself prospectively. And so for us, it's very difficult, I think, to truly grasp what it might do. Hence, we see these extreme perspectives of people saying this is the end of society, and then other people saying this will save us. And I think that is actually a confusing situation for most of humanity, because whom to believe, and how can we be so polarized even on a technology where you would think that one expert should have similar opinion like another expert? Unfortunately, that is not the case. So when I look at AI and what it might do in the general context of innovation, it will definitely stretch us as society, as nations, as much as regulatory bodies, as much as customer experiences that we might be able to create, as much as political perspective and view. So trying to understand that is obviously a task not for few, but for many. And so we have to find good ways on how might we find solutions that work for us and that allow us to bring these technologies to life in the most advantageous ways for us and not in limiting ways. And I think with that, we have to understand that all of the data points that we created as humanity in the past lived with bias, lived with the context of the past, and that these technologies have been trained and continue to be trained on these past realities. And that's now to the context of innovation, that in the world that we might want to live in the future, we need to infuse way more innovative perspective to what we want to create moving forward in order to have a tool like AI help us to create that.
As you're talking, it's making me think about, the context, right, of how AI is applied by business. When in your world and what you preview and what you see, are most people applying AI rapidly? Is it kind of a little bit middle of the road? Like, what are you seeing? Because at least from my vantage point, what I'm seeing is that most people are applying AI more from an individual basis across organizations, not necessarily, there doesn't seem to be a organizational strategy around how it should be applied. It's kind of just very loose in terms of what's happening from one organization to the next.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest challenge with the term AI is that it's a little bit a word that summarizes or kind of contains a lot of individual components that fall into it. So when I look back at my own journey, even at Lufthansa at the time, we were, for example, leveraging a small component of what AI can do in the separation of silverware from a tray. So it wouldn't need to be done manually, right? And that goes back almost 20 years. So in the supply chain side, we've seen AI in its various components leveraged for a multitude of use cases for many, many years. I think what happened with the release of OpenAI, first kind of consumer-facing product, what it just kind of exploded on the demand side of what's the opportunity. And I think most organizations weren't fully aware then the evolution of Gen AI and the speed of Gen AI kind of, now moving into not only images, but text, video, and so forth. We see kind of the impact that has also on more of the demand side. So not so much the supply side, but the demand side of organizations and how that can be reinvented. How can we predict demand better? How can we create assets to create the prediction for demand better? How can we interact with consumers in different ways because of generative AI? All of that is something where I see many organizations looking into, okay, what can that do for us? Always with the question, okay, what does that mean legally? Because a lot of the creation that sits in the interaction between, for example, a company and a consumer, there's a lot of legal requirements to be watched out for, because that is a subject that is yet to be defined how we want to handle. And so we're seeing more and more companies being aware and moving in that direction to protect themselves and to find out, okay, what's the best solution. So to answer your questions, yes, I see a lot of organizations looking into the subject, most of them with a certain amount of cautiousness to understand, okay, what can I really do? What is the now? What is the near? What is the far? And really most asking the questions, how do I start to lay these base case layers and connect what I may have done on the supply side with now the demand side possibilities of AI?
Yeah, this is a very fascinating topic, especially as you lean into kind of the world of innovation. As you're thinking about, maybe put yourself in the seat of a futurist, do you feel like this is the kind of the innovation of our time, at least over the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you feel like there are other topics maybe that we're ignoring that could be coming behind this AI topic? I mean, from my vantage point, it feels like the innovation of our time, but I'd love to know kind of what you're seeing.
No, I would agree. To me, it's a little bit, and this is a terrible analogy because it's way beyond that, but it's from the impact and the second and third order effect that it has. It's similar to moving from a horse to a car, right? Like there's so much innovation that needs to happen just because we are now in the AI age of the world in the end, that has like a whole red tail of things that we have to think through. So I would say absolutely yes. In the end, to me, I sometimes say it's almost like a trampoline of what's possible, right? We're not standing on the ground and trying to reach something, but we're now giving a trampoline and we can jump in all types of directions and in new heights and all of these opportunities. So I would say yes, it's the innovation and the enabler of our times for something truly new that we also don't fully grasp yet.
Okay, so if you're a business leader and you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, okay, I know I need to get started with AI. I know I need to get moving. What would you say when you think about the organization layer? What are the top 3 things that they either need to be focused on or need to be doing right now in the space of AI? If for some reason they haven't gotten started, maybe they have just been kind of looking and lurking from the outskirts, but not necessarily dipping their toe in the water. How would they begin?
I think it's a challenging question to ask because probably also here the answer is it depends a little bit on the context of where you are. But maybe to generalize, what I would say is encourage all of your employees to test and try the waters with AI, wherever may be the use case, whether that's Gen AI or some other solutions that fall into the category, predictive analytics, solutions like that. Like test what is possible, engage your employees to do. I think what's an interesting model is South Korea is looking at training all of its people above a certain age group on AI solutions just to make sure that they have a chance in this rapidly evolving world, as that technology is going to be a game changer. So think of it that way. Take everyone on the journey and then find solutions in between. The other extreme that I'm going to mention is find a group and a team that is going to radically rethink what you do with AI as that trampoline to the business. Let's use it that way. And truly understand from a more practical way how that might affect, if you take it back into the organization, how and what you're doing today. Because if you have kind of the look at the two extremes of what's possible and what not, you're in a good spot. And then I think, many components, because most organizations don't have access to the resources nor the kind of money that it needs to develop. Look at partnerships, look at who you're working with and how you're working with them in order to kind of bring that knowledge into the organization and be hyper intentional of where and how you want to choose, because there's also a lot of money to be wasted. So look at both perspectives of the pie of creating the opportunities and mitigating the risk of too much play, maybe.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, I even think about, speaker kind of CEO Kat Cole will say things like, think about the hot shot rule, right? If you were to get fired and someone was to come in and take your job, what are the first, 3 things they would do? Okay, great, go do that. And I kind of think about, when you were talking about that last piece, I kind of think about, what's unautomated in your organization, and can AI do that? Like, think about some of the things that you're just, maybe mailing it in today, that if someone else was to come in and instantly be able to see some of these things, think about how AI could play a role in kind of cutting waste, cutting time. I used to think about, back in the day, we used to outsource things, right? So we would say, okay, this is a low kind of cost, low, importance item. Let's outsource it. Let's offshore it. And then as a result, let's get our folks here in this space working on higher level items, because we can outsource some of that. Well, now that's really the play for AI, right? A lot of that stuff can be outsourced.
Yeah, I would say the 2 biggest use cases, if you want to structure it, is either how can AI drive my growth? That's the demand side play most of the time. And how can I leverage AI to minimize my costs? And that is then automation, it's better processes, even with humans, more transparent processes, better data loops. There's a lot of things that organizations should be looking at. And I have the feeling that many organizations with a broad, interest in that from their employee body are already doing that.
Yeah, that's good. What final thoughts would you have for our listeners today?
I think the innovation field is probably, and that's where my head goes a lot lately. What does AI do for innovation, and how is the innovation practice changing, leveraging AI? And I think it's a fascinating field to tap into. So from that perspective, as we are in the field of innovation, I would encourage and be interested in what your listeners are thinking of, how AI is changing the innovation practice, where the innovation practice is going with AI. I have a few thoughts in the context of, when you look at how to leverage technology in the general innovation practices, whether that is certain frameworks that we're using or certain processes that are quite dominant in the innovation practice, how will they be evolving, changing, mitigating in the context of AI? And I often leverage the term computational design as an opportunity to bring the field of innovation and AI closer together, to understand how might we be able to not only design, business models and business practices and products and services, but to truly understand the context of the innovation that we're bringing to life in the context, and what kind of second, third order effects it will have on certain other industries, on certain consumer behaviors, and how do we bring all of that thinking to life, is something that I'm concerning myself a lot with. So would love to find more thinkers in the field and connect the dots.
That's awesome. Where can people find and follow you?
Easiest to reach out, obviously, on LinkedIn. That's the place to be these days. I have reduced my X activities to the minimum for some obvious reasons. So I would suggest find me on LinkedIn. It's the easiest. It's always Zimmerman with a double N. That sometimes gets missed. And then I'm looking forward to connecting and talking to you.
Awesome. Well, as you can tell, this is one intelligent woman right here. So please go out and find her, follow her, and just glean from her thought leadership. She's pretty amazing. Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.